So here we'll be speaking about alchemy and the soul, integrating the
I
shadow
might have to ask
through
Robbie.
creative.
Robert.
Thank you very much, Jean, for inviting me tonight to speak. It's a real pleasure to be here as a fairly new member of the Jung Society. And I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people joining us tonight. So it feels quite fitting to begin here, because long before psychology emerged as a scientific discipline in Europe in 1879, of course, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people had developed very sophisticated systems to understand identity, relationships, healing, belonging, social and emotional well-being. And beyond that, of course, there's the deep time history, and really that represents one of humanity's oldest continuing ways of understanding people. So then in more recent history, we have recorded Western European history of looking at understanding man's search for meaning and understanding of the self and what we would call psychology. And that occurred only about 2,500 years ago. So I always think it's just interesting to think about, by comparison, modern Western scientific psychology is only 147 years. So even though we think, oh, Jung's theories, 82 years ago, that's quite a long time, but really in the scheme of things, it's very, very modern and recent. But I think the thing is that human beings have been trying to understand ourselves, other people in the world, for as long as we know that humans have existed. So I might just pick up now on who's here tonight. So it'd be really interesting, maybe you could raise your hand if you're a member of the Jung Society. Okay. And who would be some people who are here for the first time tonight? Okay, great. And I thought it might be nice if you could turn to someone that you don't know, just introduce yourself, because there are new people. It's always nice to have a sense of knowing who we all are, maybe just to say hello, introduce your name. Thank you. Now, just bringing you back again. I also want to get a sense of maybe what disciplines people come from. So are there any helping professionals here tonight, specifically psychologists? Put your hand way up. Oh, there they are. Yes. Any teachers? Okay. And maybe what about people who are here because they're just lifelong, not just, but they're lifelong learners and they just want to know more? Yeah, so there's quite a few there too. Great. It's really nice that we have such a diverse audience. So that brings me to why I'm here tonight and why I'm talking about what I am. So I've long admired Carl Jung's extraordinary contribution to psychology as the founder of analytical psychology. I first encountered his work when I was studying at the ANU here in Canberra, doing my master's, and it was really just in the context of, well, largely in relation to personality theory and qualitative analysis. And yet through more than 2 decades of actual work in evidence-based practice. And I left in 2001 and very much came out as a behavioural scientist. And I guess fundamentally, I do see myself as a scientist, very well versed in CBT at the time. But why would I keep returning to Jung time and time again? And I suppose it's because I think science helps us understand why people change, what really does work, what the evidence is by that, I mean. But Jung helps us understand what it feels like. And human beings forever and ever have tried to understand this through things like myths, symbols, dreams, and images. And so I feel that Jung's contribution for me really helps me understand the deeply human experience of suffering, meaning, transformation, and becoming. And I dare say that like most of us coming to something like this tonight, gathering, we want to understand ourselves. We want to understand what is the meaning and the purpose of different things. Not that I have all the answers at all, but it just reflects how we're very interested. So over the years, I've come to believe that practicing psychology is as much an art as it is a science. And as I said, evidence-based therapies absolutely provide extremely powerful methods for reducing distress and changing behaviour. But I think human beings respond to the complementary language of what Jung has to offer. And it's also interesting that, you know, Jung contributed so much to study also in laboratories, even though he's known for his naturalistic observation studies outside of the lab in real world settings. He just contributed so much to our understanding of things like the word association test and other things that we have since been able to study more. Bringing it forward, the evidence around analytical psychology even to 2025, a German outcome study found moderate to large improvements in psychological symptoms, relational functioning, personality structure, and quality of life. So these were studies in which they compared, they looked at the gains that had sustained for many, many years from people who were involved in Jungian analysis. And some of those benefits even lasted more than 6 years after therapy. So, of course, there are some issues around being able to prove cause and effect, but I think the evidence currently supports this real-world effectiveness of Jungian psychotherapy. So, the model, I think another reason why I really am drawn to Jung is because it's really meaningful in work with people who've experienced complex, systematic childhood and relational trauma. Most people who come to see me are not just seeking alleviation from symptoms like anxiety and depression. They also want to understand, why do they keep repeating the same relational patterns in their life with a partner, a parent, child or colleague, or even themselves? And they want to begin rediscovering their true self and living differently. And it's just surprising how many of my clients continue to look back to really ancient philosophical models as well, such as Stoicism. I think we always try to search for understanding of what helps and understand human suffering. So by working on post-traumatic growth, survivors can actually reconstruct an authentic identity, create meaning around their personal histories, and develop long-term psychological resilience. Although I also adhere to trauma-informed therapy as well, of course, but it's another approach that really does help people understand themselves better. And that issue of the childhood and relational trauma, it's really significant. Most of the clients I see do also have that coexisting. And Australian studies report that childhood trauma history, it's in approximately 2/3 to 80% of some clinical populations. And we know that trauma can really disrupt a person's sense of identity, safety, and connection. And people don't remember their stories in a coherent, linear way, which doesn't lend itself so well to perhaps some other therapies that don't take account primarily, first of all, of the feelings of the person and the dreams that they have and the symbols that are in their life. So that's where I think Jung's concepts really have a great deal to offer people who are trying to understand fragmented experiences in their life. And it also allows people to do this gradually on their own terms, to integrate memories and be transformed. So that is the question, how people truly transform that eventually led me to explore another therapeutic approach in addition to my more scientific educational background. Oh, I better change some slides. Sorry, just realised that. So there we are. And this would lead me to discussion of midway through my career, I became increasingly interested in the evidence supporting art therapy as a complementary approach to standard talking therapy. And this led me to do some professional development and then some formal training. And since then, I found it to be an absolutely invaluable addition to my clinical practice. Not for everyone, but particularly for people who they may have developmental difference and don't feel as comfortable using words as they would doing experiential things. And, you know, it's quite remarkable that you can have a session with someone who may be completely mute, functional mutism, and not feel safe talking about their thoughts and feelings, but be able to, over time, draw and paint and then slowly whisper a little bit about what they've drawn and interact with their image. And I found with art therapy that I use this as a tool to deliver evidence-based therapy, but it helps people cut to the absolute core issues that are driving a lot of their behaviour and experiences. So art therapy is a form of psychotherapy. It combines creative image making and reflection and discussion. So I'm not commenting on the person's work. They're interacting with their own artwork. It's not about creating something that is necessarily visually appealing to other people at all. But it does really help self-awareness. It can help integrate difficult experiences. And it offers a great deal of psychological healing and growth. So for some clients who have never picked up a paintbrush or a brush, or might have some issues around feeling that they're not creative, there are lots of ways into art therapy and lots of simple exercises that can really have quite profound outcomes. For example, some simple exercises are line drawings, where a person gets to choose what colour, what shape, what texture they draw, and the directive might just be to draw a feeling that is a current feeling that they have that day. There's no right or wrong. And one of the really interesting things is that art therapy offers people choice, particularly for people who've been through trauma, and that's where choice can often be taken away. It's quite empowering because they get to choose what materials do they select. Is it paper, paint, clay? It also helps calm the nervous system. Just rhythmic movement, focused attention, and I call it creative mindfulness. And I've seen a lot of people in groups who, for example, might have very perfectionistic thinking, and it's very hard for them to do something because they might think they'll make a mistake. But different ways that you can administer art therapy allows them to have some freedom to try things out. It's a bit like a behavioural experiment, and they discover a great deal about themselves, including their flexibility. They get to imagine how they would like things to be, and they get to set the pace and determine what things they want to reveal or keep private. So in this way, the creative process itself becomes part of the healing. By the way, the different images that you see tonight, I've put these together just from different artworks I've done, just to give you an idea of maybe some of the symbols. Everyone's artwork is different though, so there's no example of, oh, this is how you do it. This is just some of mine. This evening, I'd like to touch on just 3 of Jung's most enduring ideas about psychological transformation from his extensive body of work. And that's alchemy, the shadows, and individuation. I'm also going to use a fictional case study to explore and illustrate some of these ideas and their parallels in contemporary evidence-based therapy. And finally, you'll have the opportunity to experience these for yourself by creating a symbolic mandala to take home as a reflection of your own journey. Okay. Just another thing is, we're not going to be discussing out loud some of the issues that you might be experiencing, because this is a recorded lecture. There's no ability to make everything private. But if anything does stay with you tonight, or you'd like to explore these ideas further, feel free to speak with me afterwards, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction for other services in the Canberra region. Also, our president, Jean, may know of other people. And I'm not a Jungian analyst myself. I should just point that out as well. And tonight, just participate to the extent that it feels comfortable for you. Also, if at any point you need to get up and fill up your coffee or have a break, that's fine. We'll save questions until the end, but if you want to jot down any questions, and then you can give them to me at the end. I'll just hand out some post-it notes and you can take some and pass. Whoops. Better not get too far away from here. So, in the spirit of Jung's fascination with myth and symbol and story, I'd like to take you back only 2,000 years. So come with me if you like, and you can either close your eyes or just focus on a spot, take a breath, and just immerse yourself in this story. So come with me to a time when myths travelled further than maps and stories were carried across the desert on the backs of camel caravans. Along the ancient incense trade route, merchants transported precious frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia to the temples of Egypt and the cities of Greece and Rome. Beneath endless skies and across golden dunes, merchants, priests, and travellers shared stories of a remarkable bird unlike any other. The Egyptians called it Bennu, the one who rises in brilliance. The Greeks later called it the Pheonix, after the deep crimson glow of fire. They believed that there was only ever one phoenix at a time, and it was said to live for 500 years. And when the end of its life approached, it did something that no other creature would dare. It built a nest high in a tree from fragrant branches of cinnamon and myrrh, and then beneath the first light of dawn, it settled into the nest and turned toward the rising sun. As the morning grew warmer, the nest got hotter and hotter and caught fire. Without fear, the phoenix spread its magnificent crimson and gold wings and fanned the flames, willingly entering the fire. As it did, it sang, a song of such haunting beauty that, according to the ancient storytellers, no other living creature had ever sung its equal. It was a song of completion, of surrender, and of hope. The flames rose higher and higher until the mighty bird disappeared completely. When the fire finally subsided, nothing remained but a small mound of warm, fragrant ash. Silence. And then something stirred. From the ashes emerged a tiny living creature, fragile as a glowing ember. Day by day grew stronger. Feathers appeared, wings unfolded. Slowly it became the magnificent phoenix once more, radiant in scarlet, gold, and purple. Finally, it gathered the ashes of its former life into a sacred egg of myrrh and carried it to the Temple of the Sun at Heliopolis before it soared once again into the sky. So this, of course, is a myth rather than history. For Jung, myths endured because they give symbolic expression to timeless psychological truths. And they speak in a language of image and symbol, giving shape to universal human experiences. They're not simply stories about magical birds and ancient heroes, but reflections of the psychological journeys we all share. These stories are about us. I've always found fairy tales and myths and legends really fascinating, and I dare say quite a lot of us have. Has anyone seen the movie The Odyssey lately? Anyone? Yeah, there's one. So apparently this is the absolute hitting all the box office records. And I think it speaks to the fact that we're all always quite fascinated by these stories. What are they stories of? I guess stories of deeply human experiences. Things like, you know, loneliness, death, questions of identity, of change, renewal, destruction, pride. You think of the Greek myths and legends, and there's something in it that we can relate to. Often they relate to an old identity that no longer fits the person we are becoming. And you might like to just take a moment to reflect on this. I call them the Ds, things like death, destruction, divorce, disability. There's a lot of Ds for some reason, but it's all about the heartbreak, grief, illness of life. And we all go through it. And I suppose that's why these stories resonate with us still today. The settings change, but the themes remain the same. So Jung believed these stories endure, obviously, because it mirrors our own psychological journey. So I'd like now to turn to the ancient language of alchemy. So Jung believed, and I suppose the phoenix is like, it's an image of transformation, and then psychological alchemy that I'll explain in a moment is like looking at the map or the language of transformation. So Jung actually spent more than 30 years studying medieval alchemical texts, and his assistant translated it from the ancient languages. That's a long time, I just wanted to point out, to be studying a concept. So the ancient alchemists of medieval times, they believed they were transforming lead into gold. And Jung came to the conclusion they were unknowingly describing the inner journey of psychological development, the lifelong process he called individuation. Alchemy begins with the raw materials, the prima materia. So this might have been like a base metal. So when it comes to Jung and his view, our own raw material of life is things like our wounds, our fears, our conflicts, relationships, shadow, unrealised potential. And rather than avoiding these experiences, they become the very substance from which growth can emerge. It's interesting to reflect on this because often it is something really massive and profoundly destroying that needed to occur when you look back to see, oh, this other thing wouldn't have emerged unless I had been through that. So the alchemists called the completed work the magnum opus, the great work, so the whole process of turning lead into gold. Or they also thought that they could create an elixir of life, other healing properties, and they were also a precursor, I understand it, to the chemists with understanding of chemical reactions and things like this. But Jung understood this as a lifelong process of integrating the personality so that we become more authentic, more balanced and whole. So transformation rarely begins in comfort. I guess that is what the Phoenix reminds us of. So Jung recognised that there were 3 stages to this process. And I'd like you to have a think about your own life. And you might like to write 1 or 2 keywords on each of, I'm going to give you sheet here. I'm still attaching it. I wonder if I could have an assistant help me hand this out. And it's going to be left with being so the top part, let's say, when you get four, now you haven't got four, is you're going to think about the first stage, which is the negrito, the breaking down. What's the custard? So there'll be a lot of detail, but just maybe one or two key words of some of the land, maybe one or two landmark issues that occurred for you on your page. If you don't want to write a word, you could perhaps draw a symbol on the back, on the very top of the page there where it says negrito. So the blackening, this is the stage of breakdown. It's characterised by loss, confusion, and the disintegration of an old identity. Although it often feels like failure or grief, Jung believed it was the essential beginning of transformation. So specifically, think about what role, belief, or identity you've had to let go
Before we
of.
speak, I want to hang on. Where's the control?
And then thinking ahead to the second.
I'm looking for this.
So the Albedo is
But
like
I
shining
want to
light on something.
go down there where
About the stage of
you turn it
insight.
on and off.
When we begin to question
We should make it
long-held
bigger. Okay,
long-held
now,
assumptions
we need to.
about ourselves and what we need to do. It's when we loosen inherited beliefs around how we should be. For example, someone might have a new insight that's helped them heal because they've been through great loss and destruction, and they might now realise, I don't have to earn love. I have worth just by the fact that I exist. Or my responsibility is to please myself rather than everyone else first. So have a little reflection on what your new insight was that helped you heal. And what was that moment of the whitening, of the realization that something no longer fitted your life, an expectation of yourself, whatever it might have been. And then the third stage, the rubedo, is the reddening. And the rubedo, it's symbolic of blood, of light. It's where transformation becomes visible in terms of action. So rather than simply thinking differently, we begin living differently. We may set healthier boundaries, choose more respectful relationships, connect with joyous hobbies, engage in creativity or play. Basically, how do we act now in accordance with values because of that insight of the last stage? So just, again, jot down something for each of those three. So like the phoenix that's rising from the ashes, this stage of the rubedo, it's not about perfection, but it's about embodying the person that you're becoming. And a question for you, if you're a little stuck on this, is what qualities do you want to carry into the next chapter of your life? It's important to realise that we can't move on this journey of wholeness without acknowledging what else is inside us, what has remained hidden within us. That maybe it could be a part of you that has been silenced, that has not been acknowledged previously, that maybe for various reasons you've had to set aside. So these are very personal things that you're writing about. You don't have to obviously share it with anyone, but just make a note. And you might be able to use some of this in the art activity that we do later on. I'm just going to now have a look at moving from symbol back to science for a little while. So whatever your theoretical orientation, The broad overarching goal of psychological therapy, I believe, is much the same: to reduce distress, improve well-being, understand why we think and feel and behave the way we do, develop healthier ways of responding. A lot of the ideas that Jung developed, a long time ago, many of his insights have parallels in modern contemporary psychology. And I just thought I'd show you this slide just to see what some of the language is and how it can be quite similar. Well, the language is different, but the concepts are the same, are quite similar. I'm going to explore in more detail soon the shadow, which can be understood alongside the maladaptive schemas, core beliefs, disowned emotional responses. The individuation concept here that I'll talk about a bit tonight, that shares common ground with developing psychological flexibility, being able to operate in a healthy adult identity and live according to one's values. Down here, the symbols and dreams and creative expression find echoes in imagery rescripting of narrative therapy, looking at metaphors, using art therapy. So whether we speak the language of neuroscience or the language of myth, an underlying principle remains quite similar, quite remarkably the same, that insight becomes most powerful when it's not just understood intellectually, but it's experienced emotionally, relationally, behaviourally. So modern therapies help people observe thoughts, feelings, gradually face fears, develop new patterns of behaviour. Jung described this as meeting the shadow and integrating previously hidden parts of the personality. And perhaps this is a form of practical alchemy. Whenever we engage deeply with something, and this is the biggest insight that I have found from Jung's work. So when we engage deeply, whether it's a therapeutic relationship, a creative expression where we've poured hours of our time and energy into something, or in whatever way we're trying to meet life's challenges, we're not just changing the outside world. We're not just increasing our understanding. We're actually changed by the experience itself. So therapy might become the vessel in which both insight and the person are transformed. And I'll talk about this more at the end, but this brings us to one of Jung's best known ideas, and that's the shadow. So Jung believed that wholeness is achieved not by rejecting parts of ourselves, but by becoming aware of them, understanding them and integrating them. And he called these hidden aspects the shadow. It's not necessarily negative or bad. They're the thoughts and feelings and qualities that we have learned to deny, suppress or disown. Sometimes these are painful emotions such as anger, shame or fear. Sometimes they're positive qualities. They could be confidence, creativity, playfulness, strengths that for one reason or another never felt safe to express. Shadow work is not about eliminating these parts. It's about bringing them into relationship with the rest of ourselves. And I guess I think of shadow work as getting to know the part of you that hasn't really been brought out and encouraged, and forming a relationship with that. So how might we begin with this? One way that I find very practical in therapy is noticing strong emotional reactions. So I might speak with a client about, what do you notice are the people or situations or things that bring about a strong feeling, whether you are very drawn and attracted to or repelled and really find something distasteful. And then to reflect on these projections. Could these qualities that you admire or like, could it also exist a little bit in you? And to become curious about it, not self-critical. It's not about how do I become like perfect or anything like that. It's really just, what is this part of me that has an aversion to a certain quality? What's it trying to protect? An example might be someone who really doesn't like people who are bossy and controlling, and they really take exception to these people. Maybe there's a part of them that actually would like to speak up, take space, maybe ask for what they need or want. And the aversion to that quality in another person is trying to protect your way of being, because perhaps growing up, someone like this might have been rewarded for keeping the peace, for not rocking the boat. So that's just a little example of a typical type of situation of shadow integration. It's about giving the unconscious a voice. This can be done through looking at our dreams, journaling, what Jung would call active imagination or creative expression. And then finally, we look at living differently. So integration, it's not completed by just the insight, but it's putting it into action, setting healthier boundaries, etc. Expressing previous hidden strengths and basically living more consistently with your actual values. I think this is also why it's so important to know what your values are. And there are so many tools out there these days that people can engage with to work out what's really important to them. And then to work out, well, how do I live by that? So in a moment, our creative activity will offer an opportunity to begin exploring these questions through image making rather than words alone. But before we do that, I'd just like to tell you a story. So this is more of a composite, fictional, illustrated case example to show how all of this comes together. So the phoenix, it's more than an ancient myth. I hope I put across that it lives whenever ordinary people find the courage to move through loss, face their shadow and become more fully themselves. So let me introduce you to Cassandra. From the outside, life looked great. She had a career, family, friendships, responsibilities. People would describe her as kind, capable, dependable. Yet beneath this exterior, she felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and increasingly disconnected from herself. As a member of the pivot generation, that she was placing everyone else's needs before her own. Someone was unhappy, she'd assumed she'd failed. Relationship became strained, she tried harder, explaining more, apologising more, and giving more. These patterns began in childhood. Cassandra grew up with an unpredictable, angry mother and an emotionally unavailable father. To survive, she became attuned to other people's needs while suppressing her own. She learned that by keeping the peace, that felt safer than expressing herself. And this is a very typical example of it is quite functional to be the way that we are. We've been shaped through childhood experience. So in this case, she has the identity of a capable, agreeable, and endlessly accommodating woman. But behind that, much of her authentic self had been pushed into the shadow. Her anger, boundaries, creativity, confidence, playfulness, ability to have a difference of opinion to others, to say no, to make requests. Eventually, like the aging phoenix, Cassandra reached a point where her old way of living could no longer sustain her. An injury forced her to stop working. Her health declined. She could no longer adopt the roles that she had found a lot of external validation from. Her marriage revealed itself to be one of a coercive, controlling arrangement, and the identity that had protected her for decades began to collapse. So this is a real example of her negredo, of the falling apart. Through therapy, creative expression, and deep self-reflection over time, Cassandra gradually grieved the parents that she never had, challenged lifelong beliefs about needing to please others, and discovered that every healthy boundary with others strengthened her relationship with herself. So she began to form a relationship with her true self and listen for the first time. What felt like loss at first slowly became liberation. As she changed, her relationships changed too. Not because she changed the other people, but because she no longer repeated the same patterns, the same relational patterns. Some relationships naturally fell away and others deepened. New opportunities and possibilities emerged. So you might remember the rubedo, the action, that became visible in her everyday life. She accepted that not everyone would approve of her. She stopped trying to manage other people and change them and began making decisions in accordance with her values. So by embracing both her light and shadow, she released the roles that kept her stuck and began the great work of becoming her true self. And perhaps you can relate to some aspects of that, or you've seen that in people around you. So we'll have a look now at the mandala. This is regarded as one of the most, well, Jung regarded as one of the most powerful symbols of the psyche's movement towards wholeness. So throughout culture and throughout history, across cultures, circular forms have appeared in art, religion, nature, and dreams. I'm sure you can think of many examples of this. And the circle often emerges during times of psychological transition when that's being depicted in art. For Jung, the circle symbolised the self, the organising centre of the personality that holds together so many different aspects of who we are. The mandala was therefore far more than just a decorative pattern. And if anyone hasn't seen it, they might have a chance to look in the Red Book with Jung's artworks and see a lot of examples of those, and the sacred geometry, the squares inside circles and so forth. He believed it emerged spontaneously, the mandala, when the psyche was moving towards greater integration, and that a mandala could offer a symbolic map of psychological wholeness. So we're doing one form of a mandala today, just for the purposes of having lots of people and not very much time. It's modified, but you can think of it as a reflection today, a way to symbolise an aspect of your inner self, of integration, of bringing together the conscious and unconscious aspects of yourself, because you will be choosing some images. You will be hopefully creating it with a sense of curiosity rather than wanting things to be perfect. It's just going to reflect more or less where you are and perhaps where your psyche is inviting you to go next. So these are just a couple of concepts here around what the mandala can bring. So I think maybe what I'd like to do is to start this off before the break. So I'd really like to invite you to experience these ideas rather than just think about them. And Jung believed that some experiences are too deep for words alone. Before we can explain them logically, we sometimes have to experience things as images, symbols, colours, feelings. So this is why creative expression can become a wonderful bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. And tonight, I hope you'll experience just a taste of this process. So with any art therapy, and you can have a look at some of the ideas I put up here on the board, there's no right or wrong way. It isn't about artistic ability or creating something beautiful. It's just about using your curiosity and your intuition to guide you. And I'd really invite you overall to trust the process. Also, modern neuroscience supports this idea, showing that creative expression does help integrate emotion, memory, and meaning. Jung recognised long ago that images often reveal what words cannot. So what will happen in this is basically this activity will allow you to have something tangible, for something to become visible that may come from your unconscious. Sometimes our hands know before our minds do. So the first step will be in a moment to just choose 3 images. So this first table, I've got all these different pictures here. When you're choosing 3 pictures, don't overthink it. You may not know why one particular image stands out. That's perfectly okay. Just trust your first response, and it'll be a little bit like an art buffet. So I've got some plate here. Grab a plate. Just pick up 3 that you think look nice for you, or maybe not nice, that you're drawn to, that speak to you. And I'm going to get you to do it maybe just 1 row at a time. So as if this row could get up and they can grab a plate either end. Actually, no, I think we might do you because you're so close to the table, you might need to move. So we'll start with this table and then this one. And while you're doing that, I'd like to just talk to you a little bit more about what these images are going to represent. So with the 3 images, one of them, I want you to think about how it represents the fire or deconstruction. So the Negredo. So what part of me needed to be released? Choose a picture that is about some sort of experience that challenged or changed you. Have a think about what needed to burn away. Could be facing fears, could be something breaking down in your life. So that's going to be image number 1. The second one that you can choose is going to represent, as you can see, albedo. What part of me is ready to, what is the aha moment where I got some insight and I recognized what's helping me heal? What strength is it that I am understanding that is emerging within me? So that second image is all going to be very much about reflection and understanding what had to go. And then the third image that you'll choose will represent rubedo, living. It's the behaviour. So just to recall that this is about putting whatever you are becoming into action. It might be a picture that represents what qualities that you want to carry into the next chapter of your life. I'll get this next row to come down, as you sit down. And just people sitting at the round table, if you could just bring your chairs around this way so everyone can get past. So that third picture, what qualities do I want to live by going forward? Who am I becoming? So what we'll do is I'll get another group of you in a minute to come to, maybe if you could come here. Oh, now before you go, just everyone who's got their pixels, if you can visit the back table and just grab one of each of the other things we have there. So there's glue, there's things to stick things on with, scissors, different embellishments. If you're not sure what to do, just pick one of each and then you can always leave it. So what will happen after you've got your pictures is we'll go on to the different stages of creating the collage. Okay, so I might get this table, once you've got your 3, if you wouldn't mind moving to the back table and then you can go back to your seats. And I think we can get the next row now. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to go on and just speak about the whole process if everyone can just listen, whether you're grabbing images or not. So the next stage will be arranging things intuitively. Don't overthink it again. Trust what feels meaningful to you. And I'm going to give you a page here to put it on. So once you've got your blueprints, you're also going to need a piece of paper to stick this on. All right. I'm just going to oh, yeah, that'd be great to use too. Yeah, just the white ones. You want that? And yeah, if you then go around in the circle, just go back to the table at the back once you've got it. Okay, so yeah, if the current group could perhaps move along a little, and we'll let the next row move in now. So the second stage will be arranging and just allowing your unconscious to have a voice rather than making everything logical and symmetrical. You're just placing it on your page, and I'd like you to place it into the center of the page because we're going to put a frame around our mandala to contain the image in a moment. Actually, could I ask for your help? Yep. So I will actually give these out as well. So these are just for the back of the room, the people who have the small mandala. Oh, and there's some smaller pieces that are going around in the back. Okay, so the first stage was to choose the 3 images and other embellishments. The second stage was to arrange it on your page. And the third important point is just to trust. You don't need to actually understand the meaning immediately. Jung believed that symbols often reveal their significance over time. So once you've placed it and arranged it, just allow the image to speak before you try to explain it yourself. Oh, yes, here we go. Oh, yes, thanks. Yeah. So that's for the little frame. If you've got a big frame, you can use a piece of paper. Yeah, if you've got a big piece of paper, you can use the big frame. If you have a little piece, you just use the little frame. Has everyone got enough? Yep. Oh, and the last row, please get up and you can grab yourself a plate, select the images. Another thing to think about is that what you're creating is completely unique. So no one else has ever made exactly what you're going to make. It's a bit like your fingerprint. No one else in the whole world has ever made it before. And I think it's nice to remember that you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else, as Margaret Mead, the famous anthropologist, said. When you're up and getting your pictures, make sure that you grab some glue or a strip of the little sticky tape so that you can affix your images to the page. And so the fourth step here is then creating or sticking everything down. So what you want to do is assemble your mandala thinking about where you want to put everything really, the colour, the background, landscape, any natural textures, shape and composition. If you need to cut things up a bit more or you want to draw something that you just don't see an image that represents anything that speaks to you, you can draw a picture or a symbol. You can write words or draw patterns. It would also be great if you would like to pick up one of the Jungian quotes that really speaks to you. That's in the gold bowl over there. And let the whole picture, whether you're drawing something abstract or figurative, let it be an expression of your inner world at the moment. So as far as mixed media materials go there, you've got quite a lot of choice. You can see a lot of 3D materials in the boxes at the back. And what you'll do in the end is, at the very end, you'll put the black frame on top of your picture, and then you'll stick that on at the corners so that it looks like a circle and it's framed. And what I'm trying to create there for you is it's a border for containing the experiences. when you have actually finished this, perhaps after our 10-minute break, I will get you to have a look at some questions that I put up here that are about reflection. And there is actually another important point. This is quite a reflective process, so it's best not to talk to everyone or to explain yourself or comment on anyone else's work, because it's not really about producing anything for anyone else. And we don't want to compare or interpret what someone else has done because it's such a deeply personal process. But you can totally notice what draws your attention, what you notice. So we might listen to some music or just have some quiet reflection time. And I'm going to put up some reflection questions for you. So that's almost called the dance, and it's just about how, as you might have heard from the lyrics, it's good to think about the whole process, isn't it? The pain also allows you to look at the dance. You wouldn't want to miss one or the other. So if you're up to the stage where you've more or less arranged your items, I can see, and then you're putting the frame on, you can stick that on with the tape. And then we'll spend a little bit of time just reflecting. There's some questions up here that you can just choose a question that resonates with you. You might like to ask yourself what's calling for healing or understanding and so forth. Some of our deepest insights don't arrive while we're creating. They emerge days or weeks later as we continue living with the image. So when you take your mandala home, you might continue to ask yourself some questions. And I've got these on the sheet there for you, the one where you wrote about some of your experiences. So there's no need to rush this process. But you can see it's organised into a few different categories. And first impressions, what symbols, what they mean. You can ask some of these key questions like, what part of myself is asking to be seen in this image? Perhaps what hidden strength is beginning to emerge? And what small step could I take this week that honours what I've discovered? And I'd like to spend a little bit of time just on the living of the rubedo, bringing it into daily life. So Jung viewed individuation as continuous, a lifelong journey. It's not like we wake up one day and say, oh, well, I'm fully individuated, I can tick that off the box. We don't wake up that way and find our perfectly completed true self, but we can become ourselves gradually, one brave decision at a time, one conversation, one act of acting in accordance with our values. So you might like to think about what those choices might look like in your daily life going forward. And I have just a couple of prompts here to think about. We'll look at, just briefly, if you're living your true self, what boundaries are in place for you? How are you protecting your energy? What diminishes you that you might need to say no to? And what helps you grow that you might want to say yes to? If we think about authenticity, the question might not be so much what do others want me to be, but who am I becoming? When it comes to creativity, what you're doing now is actually giving your inner voice, your inner world a voice through selection of images, of making your mark on the page. And if you can do this with an attitude of curiosity, compassion, not judging yourself or the way that, whether it looks good for anyone else, but trying to understand a bit more about what was I drawn to and what is that saying to me? So this is what Jung called the rubedo, the final stage of psychological alchemy. And doesn't mean it's without struggle, but it's about living life with increasing integrity and allowing the fire to change us, one ordinary choice at a time. I'd like to finally come to perhaps an insight that I had from examining all of this material. So just sharing that, and after revisiting all of these very familiar Jungian ideas. So like the phoenix, transformation begins by trusting a process we cannot completely control, like a fire. To me, all of these concepts point to one overarching principle. Oh, I think I just... and that is the reciprocal nature of transformation. So alchemy is not just about transforming materials, it's about mutual transformation that occurs whenever we enter deeply into relationship with something, as I was saying a bit earlier in the talk. Some really practical examples are, if you imagine a gardener, they cultivate a garden, yet the garden cultivates qualities in the gardener. For example, patience, humility, attentiveness. Or take a chef. A chef transforms raw ingredients into an amazing meal. The chef toils over a lifetime to perfect his or her craft. So the person who is the chef is transformed and shaped by discipline, intuition, and creativity. Sorry, this might not be working. Something I can relate to more is a therapist. So a therapist hopes to help clients change. Yet every client leaves traces within the therapist, whether that's deepening compassion for another person, learning from other people, their wisdom, being affected by their self-awareness. And I think the same is true for all other aspects of life, whether it's parenting, we shape our children shape us, teaching, we influence the children, they influence us. Making art, we create a work of art and then that has an effect on us. Writing, our written work, loving, caring for others. And I'd suggest that in every meaningful relationship, both participants are changed. So this reflects also Jung's understanding of individuation. And I think what's interesting to me is something even broader, that psychological growth happens not just through thinking, but engaging with life. It's our relationship with life itself, with suffering, with creativity, with the unconscious. Jung described the prima materia, the raw materials of our lives, our wounds, relationships, etc. He described that as the raw material that we bring. The magnum opus, or the great work, this is the lifelong process of integrating these experiences into the more authentic, balanced whole self. This transformation requires engagement. For example, if you take the performing arts, someone couldn't go and just stand in a dance studio for 3 hours, 3 times a week, and expect anything to be different. It's because of their meaningful engagement with the choreographer, the music, the other participants, the time and energy and discipline to perfect it until it becomes a work of art that can be performed. And so without that fire, the raw material remains unchanged. Yet the fire, so to speak, is not always suffering. If you think of the ancient alchemists, and they had these beakers in which they'd put different products and elements and then burn them. It's interesting to think about, well, what is the beaker in your life? What is it holding, the raw materials? So the fire could be your discipline, creativity, love, purpose, shared endeavour. And just to follow on with that performing arts example, when people come together to create something larger than themselves, it's like the rehearsal room becomes that alchemical vessel. The choreography, the music, the storyline, the songs and dances, it reshapes the dancers and actors and singers themselves. And then when the audience participates by going on that journey, they're also changed. So perhaps this is the great work. Ordinary life is the magnum opus. Whenever we're engaged in meeting life's challenges, we enter the fire of experience. We shape the work and the work shapes us. And I'll just pause for a moment to just allow you to think about how that relates to your life. Where do you leave your imprint on the world? And how does the world leave its imprint on you? For me, that's true alchemy of the soul. As Jung wrote, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed, and perhaps the same is true of every meaningful encounter with life itself.
I'd remind everyone to have a look at our website, canberrajungsociety.org.au, very easy to find it. We'll put a lot more sort of background information there from tonight and ongoing, and of course, whatever's happening in future.
You can do simple line drawings. I think collage is really nice because you're still interacting and making an image, but you just draw to certain colours, textures, themes. It's a little bit easier and more accessible. Other work that you can do is if you're really lost for it, if you don't know where to start, you can do a still life. And I've done where I might have photos with everyone draws or paints it. And then the interaction that each person has to do drawing is very interesting to look at. So you might have one person who draws storms all over it, and they talk about how, they feel inspired, for example. Someone else really focuses on the colors and the softness. And it's not so much, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. You're using these tools to access the relationship you have with the image. And it's not for anyone else to even judge it, but when you describe your work. So something you could do when you reflect on your image at home is to really go through some of the questions that are on that sheet. Like what is your overall feeling when you look at your picture? What does it remind you of? What parts of your picture do you really like? What you drawn to? Do you not like and you'd like to change it? If you could. If you were in the picture, how would you feel? What is the image saying to you? And it's just another way to access the unconscious. And it often really, when you reflect on this slowly over time, you really do get to some interesting thought issues that can be worth exploring over time. And that's kind of,
Okay.
different way of coming to realisation rather than just using the very logical environment.
And Colin. Hi. Colin, would you like to say something about our impending experience with your art in November? Is it November we're having Colin back?
Was Bhutan, our Indian artist, was doing a big trip to India at that time. He was booked for that. Bhutan is into Jungian concepts and ideas of his art. We met him in the holidays. He said, I'm only here for a short time and I'm going to India to do a whole lot of work. He works very much in mythological artwork, so they're quite extreme, quite interesting, huge paintings. And he said, we'll have to be next year now. So we found Colin coming in November. Colin's a great artist too. I'll do to come and speak.
Yes, I'm happily stepping into the breach. It's been vacated by another artist. and I think turn it
Yeah, a bit closer to you.
up closer.
This one.
No, you don't need that. That's okay.
Let me think. Yes, I'm a painter, figurative painter. I've had at least 10 solo exhibitions over the course of 30 years. I've had overseas studios, and I think why I'm going to speak at the Jungian Society is that some of Jung's ideas have resonated in how I approach my paintings. Recent paintings I've been working on have been mermaids and mermen. If you're familiar with Jung's complete works, which I take some of you would be, he does
Just here in the library.
refer to certain types of mermaids in the alchemical process as well. Here, so I'm interested in that Jungian idea of what did the mermaids actually mean to people in those times, rather than what they might mean to a very commercialized Disneyland sort of version of mermaids. I'm looking at trying to go much further back, so I've adopted deliberately a 19th century style of painting to deliberately put the viewers back to an earlier time. They reference pre-Raphaelite artists. But I'll also be just speaking about my artistic journey over many decades.